Are you struggling with finding your passion? Are you tired of hearing people say that you just need to find your passion and everything else will fall into place? What if you don't have a passion? Or what if your passions are watching YouTube and doing nothing? How are you supposed to turn these things into a career? If you're struggling with this idea of passion and trying to figure out what to do with your career, then you should definitely read So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. This is a pretty short book, and he split it into four sections or four rules, as he calls them. And his first rule is don't follow your passion. He defines the passion hypothesis as follows. The key to occupational happiness is to first figure out what you're passionate about and then find a job that matches this passion. He thinks this idea of passion is misleading and even dangerous because it can just lead you down a path where the skills you develop aren't useful at all. Instead, he argues that most successful people didn't start with a clear passion. So his first argument is that career passions are rare. He looks at this research conducted in 2002, where these group of researchers looked at a bunch of university students and just asked them what their passions were. And the top 5 passions that they rated were dance, hockey, skiing, reading, and swimming. His argument is that when you look at these passions, they're not really going to help you get a job. 96% of these identified passions weren't even related to a job or some sort of career skill. Instead, they were just related to hobby-style interests. So he draws a conclusion from this research study that how would you follow a passion that you don't even have in the first place, that's not relevant to the marketplace? The second argument that he makes around passion is that passion takes time to develop. You don't just develop it immediately, or it's not like pre-programmed and you immediately get it. And his third argument is around the self-determination theory, where he argues that in business, the passion hypothesis is followed and the science says something different, where the 3 main factors that underlie a good career are autonomy, relatedness, and competence. Relatedness concerns the people you work with. And then the other 2 factors, autonomy and competence, he looks at both of those as you develop more and more skills, you become more and more competent. And this takes time. You need to build up these skills. And as you're more and more competent, you have more opportunities to pursue autonomy in your career. So the second main point that he makes under rule number 1, don't follow your passion, is that trying to pursue your passion is dangerous. For all of this increased focus on following our passion and holding out for work we love, we aren't getting any happier. The 2010 Conference Board survey of U.S. jobs satisfaction found that only 45% of Americans describe themselves as satisfied with their jobs. This number has been steadily decreasing from the mark of 61%, recorded in 1987, the first year of the survey. This is not just about a bad business cycle. Through both economic boom and bust during the past 2 decades, our job satisfaction numbers have shown a consistent downward trend. Among young people, the group perhaps most concerned with the role of work in their lives, 64% now say that they're actively unhappy in their job. This is the highest level of dissatisfaction ever measured for any age group over the full 2-decade history of the survey. In other words, our generation-spanning experiment with passion-centric career planning can be deemed a failure. The more we focused on loving what we do, the less we ended up loving it. Basically, in this first rule, don't follow your passion, he's making the argument that first of all, passion is rare and hard to find. Second of all, most people don't have a pre-existing passion that they can use to actually earn money. Like, most people are not going to be like pro hockey players. And the third thing that he's arguing for is that looking at everything through the lens of passion and are you passionate about this job or are you not passionate about this job just decreases your job satisfaction. So his second rule is be so good they can't ignore you. This entire rule can be summarized as instead of chasing passion, focus on getting really, really good at something and the passion will follow. So he starts by arguing that instead of a passion mindset, you should adopt a craftsman mindset. He says that the craftsman mindset focuses on what you can offer the world. The passion mindset focuses on what the world can offer you. This mindset is how most people approach their working lives. He gives you 2 reasons as to why he dislikes the passion. Focus only on what your work offers you. It makes you hyper aware of what you don't like about it, leading to chronic unhappiness. This is especially true for entry-level positions, which by definition are not going to be filled with challenging projects and autonomy. These come later. When you enter the working world with the passion mindset, The annoying tasks you're assigned or the frustrations of corporate bureaucracy can become too much to handle. Second and more serious, the deep questions driving the passion mindset, who am I and what do I truly love, are essentially impossible to confirm. Is this who I really am? And do I love this? Rarely reduced to clear yes or no responses. In other words, the passion mindset is almost guaranteed to keep you perpetually unhappy and confused, which probably explains why Bronson admits not long into his career seeker epic, "What should I do with my life?" that the one feeling everyone in this book has experienced is of missing out on life. This idea of be so good they can't ignore you, which is also the title of the book, he gets it from this guy called Steve Martin, who wrote about it in his memoir called Born Standing Up. I've been meaning to read it, but I haven't read it. Interviewing the actor and comedian Steve Martin about his memoir Born Standing Up. They talked about the realities of Martin's rise. "I read autobiographies in general," Martin said, "and I often get frustrated and say, you left out that one part here. How did you get that audition for that one thing where suddenly you're working at the Copa? How did that happen?" Martin wrote his book to answer the how question, at least with respect to his own success in stand-up. It was in this explanation of how that Martin introduced a simple idea that floored me when I first heard it. The quote came in the last 5 minutes of the interview when Rose asks Martin his advice for aspiring performers. "Nobody ever takes one note of my advice because it's not the answer they wanted to hear. What they want to hear is, here's how you get an agent, here's how you write a script, but I always say, be so good they can't ignore you." If somebody's thinking, how can I be really good? People are going to come to you. That's basically what the craftsman mindset is. Instead of focusing on what the world offers you, you instead focus on what you can offer the world. This basic idea of the craftsman mindset is the foundation of this book, and that's what he argues that you should build your career on top of. Now we get into this idea of career capital. I hadn't really heard about it anywhere else, and it's a really simple idea. So he starts by defining what great work is, and he says that there's three main factors that define great work. The first one is creativity, the second one is impact, and the third one is control. He argues that if you have these three factors, you're going to enjoy your work and you're going to think it's great work. He argues that these three factors, creativity, impact, and control, they're rare and valuable. Careers that offer you these things or jobs that offer you these things are really high in demand. In order to get these things that are in super high demand, you need to offer society that's also rare and valuable. That supply and demand says that if you want these traits, you need rare and valuable skills to offer it in return. Think of these rare and valuable skills you can offer as your career capital. The craftsman mindset, with this relentless focus on becoming so good they can't ignore you, strategy well suited for acquiring career capital. This is why it trumps the passion mindset if your goal is to create work you love. Instead of focusing on your passion, you look at different careers and determine if they satisfy these conditions of creativity, impact, control. And in order to get those careers, you need to offer up rare and valuable skills that are in low supply. He also has these three disqualifiers for applying the craftsman mindset. First one is the job presents few opportunities to distinguish yourself by developing relevant skills that are rare and valuable. 2, the job focuses on something you think is useless or perhaps even actively bad for the world. 3, the job forces you to work with people you really dislike. How do you go about getting this career capital? How do you accumulate it? Basically, he argues that you need to pick some rare, difficult, valuable skills and you need to apply deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is when you're constantly pushing yourself into the zone of discomfort. In order to apply deliberate practice, you should be able to quantify something and then just push yourself beyond that. This stretching yourself past your limits and having immediate feedback are the two key cornerstones of deliberate practice. So he basically defines the 5 habits of a craftsman. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You can kind of just get the idea by just listening to the subheading. Decide what capital market you're in. Step 2, identify your capital type. Step 3, define good. Step 4, stretch and destroy. And step 5, be patient. This idea of being so good they can't ignore you, or this entire career capital thing, is related to the competence factor in the self-determination theory. Alright, now let's talk about rule number 3, which is called turn down a promotion. Basically, once you've acquired your career capital, you're really good at some skills. He argues that instead of training it for more money or more responsibilities, you should start trading it for more control in your life. And then he goes on to define the two traps that get people who try to gain more control in their lives. The first control trap is when people try to gain more control, but they don't have enough career capital to back it up. He gives an example of a woman who basically decides to quit her job and start a blog, but she basically gives up after a while because she needs food to eat. Like she can't just sustain this lifestyle. Basically, his first argument is that you need enough career capital to actually be able to demand more control from your employer. The second control trap that he argues for is that once you have enough career capital, your employer won't want to let you go. It's better for them if you stay in your job and like dedicate more and more time and effort into it instead of taking back some of your time and gaining more control. So how exactly do you avoid these two basic control traps? He actually goes and interviews Derek Sivers for this answer. I think he made a really successful company called CD Baby back in the day. Basically, the idea that Derek Sivers gives him is this law of financial viability. Do what people are willing to pay for. He says that money is a neutral indicator of value. By aiming to make money, you're aiming to be valuable. So the law of financial viability is basically when deciding whether to follow an appealing pursuit that will introduce more control into your work life, seek evidence of whether people are willing to pay for it. If you find this evidence, continue. If not, move on. So basically, if you're going to go out there and quit your job, at least make sure that whatever skills you developed, if you offer them out into the marketplace, people would be willing to pay you for them. I really like this idea of financial viability before trying to get more control into your career, because nobody wants to be the person who quits a job and then they don't have anything else lined up. Of course, if a job is making you miserable or it's not a good work environment, of course you should quit, but that doesn't mean in the pursuit of passion, you're quitting your job and there's no money or food on the table. Now let's talk about rule number 4. Rule number 4 is think small, act big. The basic idea behind this book is that to get your hands on a career that you really, really like, you need to develop some skills that are rare and valuable, which is basically your career capital. And once you have enough career capital, you can start trading that for traits that make a good career, such as creativity, impact, control, like those 3 factors. He argues that one of those traits of a good career is mission, having a mission of some sort. He basically argues that you can't just start off with some sort of mission on day one. You actually need a lot of experience. He argues that you need to get to the cutting edge of a field, which requires a lot of time and effort. Even here, he argues that you can't just skip to the step of having a mission. You need to trade some sort of career capital for that. But also at the same time, he argues that having some sort of mission is very, very satisfying. I would say the best way to think of a mission is that it spans multiple jobs. It's like a unifying theme for your working life. So he argues that you make these little bets or start these smaller projects that are trying to help you understand what sort of mission you can pursue, and you get feedback from these projects. That's the first thing that he argues for. Try to place little bets in different fields. And where should you put these? Like, where exactly do these projects land? That argument that you should get to the edge of your field and then look around and see. And once you're at the cutting edge, he argues that the best missions are just beyond that, in this region called the adjacent possible. The second strategy that he argues for is called the law of remarkability. This law says that for a project to transform a mission into a success, it should be remarkable in 2 ways. First, it must literally compel people to remark about it. Second, it must be launched in a venue conducive to such remarking. Basically, in order to understand this law of remarkability, he gives this example of a guy who goes around America and starts this show called American Treasures, where he basically goes to different people who probably dug up stuff in their backyard or found something in the attic and tries to look at it from an archaeological lens and actually tries to basically identify if it might actually be valuable. In reference to this guy, he says, with Kirk French, we also see the law of remarkability in action. His general mission was to popularize modern archaeology. There are lots of non-remarkable ways to pursue this mission. For example, he could have worked on making the archaeology curriculum at Penn State more appealing to undergrads, or published articles on the field in General Interest Science magazine. But these projects would not have generated the type of attention-grabbing success that can transform your career into something compelling. Instead, Kirk decided to head straight into people's homes and use archaeological techniques to help them uncover the significance, if any, of family treasures. This approach is remarkable, an observation reinforced by the number of speaking invitations Kirk now receives, including a recent opportunity to address the largest conference in his field about lessons learned as a popularizer. When he gave the address, the crowd overflowed the auditorium, an impressive feat for someone who had just earned his doctorate. So basically, try to pursue this idea of a mission by being creative and finding a different route or a remarkable route. The passion hypothesis is not just dangerous, it's also misleading. The second argument is in order to obtain the traits that a good career has, you need to go out there and trade them for something. And that something is rare and valuable skills that can be bundled together as career capital. Once you have a career capital though, you can start gaining more and more control in your working life. In order to find a mission, basically a unifying theme across your entire career that spans multiple jobs, you basically need to go out there and get to the cutting edge of your field and look at the adjacent possible. And secondly, you need to pursue the law of remarkability, which basically argues that you need to approach this idea of a mission in a remarkable way that causes people to talk about it and markets it out into the world. Honestly, this book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, is a relief. I'm constantly hearing about passion, and I'm just starting my career, and it's actually really annoying because what is my passion? I don't really have some sort of overarching passion, or I didn't really have an overarching passion as a child that I can just now look back on and use it for my life. Right, so we talked about getting a good career, but what should you do with the money you earn from your career? If you're struggling with understanding how to invest your money, you should definitely check out this video I made about investing in the stock market.